This is the very first video game I ever completed. When I first bought my Nintendo, I didn't have any games for it for quite a long time. In the meantime, a good friend of mine loaned me this game. So, since this was all I had to play, I reckon I must have finished this about 20 times. It's been a long time since I last played it, but it's all very familiar. So, you're the kid who's got an alien friend who changes shape when you feed him jelly beans. It's actually a really cool concept. It's a shame they didn't make a cartoon series of it or something. The controls are really straightforward. Press select to choose a jelly bean, A to throw it, and B to whistle the blob to your side. The boy has a really bad skid on his run, which is a bit annoying, but there's not much twitch reflex gameplay here. The fun of the game comes from turning the blob into different things and trying to navigate the environments creatively. The graphics are actually really nice, and the music's repetitive but catchy. You'll never forget this tune. Ever. But the game is really short. Once you know what you're doing, you can beat it within an hour. In fact, I just watched a guy on YouTube do it in about 7 minutes. It's the kind of game that becomes really easy once you know where to go and what to do. It's the figuring out that's fun. There isn't any other game like A Boy and His Blob. The blob himself has a lot of personality, and it's such an original concept, I think it still stands up pretty well. Second game this week is Mega Man, the original. What was it about this little colour-changing robot that appealed so much back in 1989? Well, 1987 if you lived in Japan or America. Man, we used to get shafted. Can you imagine waiting 2 years for a big game's release these days? Anyway, I think there were three main things that set this game apart. Firstly, the ability to choose your levels in any order was a really fresh idea. Secondly, I think the charisma and character of the bosses boosted the game's appeal. 6 different bosses, all with their own quirks and patterns. And they all ended in man. The third thing that was original and awesome was the ability to steal the boss's weapon after you beat him, eventually making Mega Man an absolute powerhouse. I'm a massive fan of the Mega Man series. Finished every one of them, multiple times. The first game's my least favourite though. Mega Man has this slippery, slidey controls that makes precision platforming very difficult. There's also 2 less bosses than any of the other games. The Dr. Wily levels are really short and pretty uneventful. There's no energy tanks, no passwords, no sliding, no rush. And some of the levels are difficult in a completely unfair way. It's not a terrible game as a result of all this, but most of the issues were fixed in the next 2 or 3 games in the series. This game's been remade twice. First on the Mega Drive in the Wily Wars compilation, and then on the PSP in the disturbingly cutesy Powered Up. At least in that version, an extra 2 bosses were added to make it match the other games. So if someone was going to discover Mega Man for the first time, I wouldn't point them towards this. It hasn't aged that well, and there are much better games in the series. Mega Man sits, which is strange because he sure as hell can't duck. Alex Kidd, Sega's answer to Mario. This was the super bonus for buying a Master System since it came packed in with the console. When the Wii Virtual Console came out, I was eager to see what I'd missed out on, to play a game I would have been obsessed with had I been a Sega boy instead of a Nintendo one. And you know what I found out? This game is It's actually a really difficult game, and much longer than I would have expected. But it's only difficult because little Alex, who seems to be some kind of midget elf in a jumpsuit, controls terribly. I'd take Simon Belmont over Alex Kidd any day. He slips, he slides, he jumps with the most erratic momentum. It really is horrible to play, which makes me think the old school Sega fanboys only loved this because they didn't know any better. Ha! Then when you get to the bosses, you just play a game of Junken with them, which has no skill involved whatsoever. If you lose to the boss twice, you die. That's right, kids. Play Junken in the playground, lose to your friends, and you are dead. Alex Kidd is just a terrible game. It's awful. Finally this week, I played Castlevania II, Simon's Quest. Like Mario 2 and Zelda 2, Castlevania 2 was different from its brothers. This game takes a lot of ideas from Zelda 2 and squeezes them into the Castlevania mold. The main difference is, although Simon controls pretty much identically to the way he did in the first game, the game itself is very different. This is a role-playing game, complete with towns, dungeons, shops, experience points and levelling up. Simon isn't going from level to level anymore, he's free to go wherever he wants. To be honest, I actually enjoyed this more than the first game. It's definitely easier in its day-to-day gameplay, especially if you do a bit of EXP grinding and level Simon up. It's also a much bigger game, even though there's only 3 bosses in the whole thing and they're all really easy. However, there is no way on God's green earth anyone could possibly finish this game without a walkthrough. No way. How could anyone possibly think, an impassable lake. Maybe if I quit my crystal and crouch for a few Oh, what do you know? Or how about, let's try jumping into this wall. Ha! It was invisible! Or how about I just crouch at this dead end for a few seconds with my red jewel and just maybe... Fantastic! A cyclone to take me to the next dungeon! I have no idea what anyone would think to put such impossibly cryptic puzzles in their game, but as I said, without a play guide there is no way I would have found stuff like this. But hey, I managed to finish it! Woo for me! All up, it's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. I actually kinda enjoyed it, but it's not at all accessible to today's gamer. Therefore, Simon's Quest is a sitter. I said sitter. Oh man, if I thought this week was crowded, check out next week. That's 5 games there. Better get cracking. Remember, if you want to leave a comment about any of this week's games, or if you want to see any of the other games coming up, check out the blog. Peace out.